Have you ever wondered why some marriages that look perfect on the outside are filled with secrets on the inside? What if I told you that love, trust, and vows aren't always the glue holding a marriage together, but rather fear, routine, or financial safety? And here's the twist. For the right kind of man, even a married woman who seems loyal on the surface might not be as unavailable as she appears. Hey there, welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of those topics that most people shy away from because it's uncomfortable, even controversial. We're going to explore the hidden truths behind marriage and ask the question, why are married women, surprisingly, sometimes the easiest to attract? On the outside, marriage is supposed to be a symbol of deep love, lasting trust, and lifelong commitment. But beneath that ideal, many marriages are quietly held together by obligation, a fear of starting over, or the comfort of financial stability. It's not always about love anymore, it becomes about security. And here's where things get more complicated. The woman who once seemed fully devoted may, deep down, crave something more, something exciting, risky, and completely outside the bounds of her vows. It might be the thrill she's missing. It might be attention, or maybe it's the feeling of being desired again. The truth is, human behavior rarely matches the ideal stories we tell about relationships. A woman might say all the right things publicly, but still seek out emotional or even physical excitement in secret. And for some men, the ones who trigger that sense of danger, passion, or mystery, it's surprisingly easy to capture her attention. But why is that? In this video, we're going to take a close look at the psychology behind this phenomenon. We'll explore the real reasons behind female infidelity, the emotional loopholes in many marriages, and the warning signs men often overlook until it's too late. So let's break this all down step by step. Ready for the first layer of truth? Let's move into it. Before marriage, a woman often moves with purpose and precision. She knows her worth, and she guards it. Every step she takes is calculated to maintain a sense of value and mystery. She doesn't just give her time or affection freely, she makes sure that any man who wants to get close to her puts in real effort. And that's not just about playing hard to get, it's a powerful strategy, whether she realizes it or not. By creating that sense of exclusivity, she naturally filters out the unserious and attracts the men who are dependable, emotionally invested, and often financially stable. She understands, even subconsciously, that the more selective she is, the more a man values her. The chase becomes part of her power. It's what makes her radiant, magnetic, and desirable. But once the ring is on her finger, once she feels secure in the relationship, something inside her starts to shift. She no longer feels the same need to impress, to charm, or to hold back. In a way that builds mystery. In her mind, the goal has already been achieved. She has the man, the home, the status. The game she once played so artfully is over. And with that, the tension that once kept the relationship alive begins to fade. Slowly, sometimes without even realizing it, she may stop putting in the same level of emotional effort. She no longer feels the urgency to be alluring or mysterious because, from her point of view, the prize has already been claimed. It doesn't mean she stopped loving her husband. But the version of herself that was once so engaged, so present, so eager to be desired, that version disappears. Affection wanes. Interest in small details fades. She might even seem emotionally distant. And here's the deeper truth. What once kept her feeling alive and energized wasn't just the man himself. It was the feeling of being pursued, of being seen as special. When that feeling vanishes, she may begin to long for it again, especially in places where it shouldn't exist. Flirtatious messages, compliments from strangers, or social media attention. Suddenly, the man who used to be the prize becomes just the background, predictable, safe, and paradoxically, that stability what she once craved starts to feel suffocating. She begins to search for excitement, for spontaneity, for a spark that interrupts the repetition of daily life. For the man, this transition can be painful and confusing. He gave his all, he committed fully, he played by the rules. But now those rules seem to have changed. He might notice her eyes no longer light up when she sees him, that her attention seems more focused on her phone than on their shared life. He tries harder, more compliments, more effort, more gifts, but nothing seems to bring her back emotionally. Why? Because the problem isn't him. It's not what he's doing wrong. It's that she no longer feels the need to try anymore. A man who truly understands this shift doesn't fall into the trap of begging or proving his worth over and over. He doesn't spiral into insecurity. Instead, he makes a powerful movie. Turns inward. He stops being overly available. He stops trying to fix something that isn't his fault. He begins to rediscover the version of himself that existed before the relationship, the version that had mystery, drive, and independence. He starts to live for himself again. Not to win her back, but to remember who he was before he started. Trying so hard. So what does this kind of self-reclamation actually look like? And how can it change the entire dynamic between them? In the last section, we explored how a man can regain his power by returning to his own purpose, rekindling that sense of self that once made him magnetic. Now, let's shift our focus to the other side of this emotional equation, the hidden desires many married women quietly wrestle with. See, while comfort and routine may seem like the ultimate goal in a relationship, they often come at a cost, especially when it comes to emotional excitement. A woman may once have been drawn to her husband because he inspired curiosity and passion, but over time, those sparks can fade under the weight of everyday responsibilities. A wedding ring, traditionally seen as a symbol of lasting commitment, can become something else entirely, a quiet contradiction. For some women, it's both a badge of stability and a painful reminder of what's missing. Unpredictability, intensity, and the thrill of being pursued. Even in marriages that appear happy on the surface, these women might find themselves longing for more, not necessarily a new relationship, but a break from monotony. Here's where the picture gets more complicated. While many believe married women are naturally immune to temptation, real-world behavior tells another story. Some women don't just react to attention from others, they seek it out. Not because they've stopped loving their husbands, but because something deep inside them yearns to feel alive again. Over time, even the most passionate marriages fall into predictable rhythms. The highs lose their edge. The excitement plateaus. What was once spontaneous becomes scheduled, even mechanical. The passion becomes partnership, and while that's not inherently wrong, it does leave emotional space for something else to sneak in. That space? It's often filled with a quiet craving. A craving not for someone new necessarily, but for the feeling of being seen again, not as a wife or a mother, but as a woman with desire, charm, and allure. That hunger for spontaneity, for feeling wanted in a raw, unfiltered way, it doesn't just go away after the vows are said. Contrary to the common belief that men are always the ones initiating affairs, studies paint a more surprising picture. Many women, in fact, take the first step. Sometimes it's subtle, a lingering glance, a light touch on the arm, a compliment delivered with just a little too much meaning. Other times, it's bolder, more deliberate, and without hesitation. According to some surveys, 60% of men who had affairs with married women admitted it was the woman who initiated the relationship. This flips the traditional narrative on its head. Affairs for many women aren't about finding someone better. They're about rediscovering a part of themselves they fear they've lost. It's not always about the man, it's about the experience, the secrecy, the rush. The contrast between a predictable home life and the mystery of something forbidden. A husband is known. His love, his flaws, his habits, they're familiar, even comforting. But a lover? He represents everything unknown, everything that could be. He is a mirror for possibility. It's in the little moments, a whispered joke, a passing touch, a gaze held just a second too long, that a married woman might begin to feel a surge of adrenaline she hasn't felt in years. And no, this doesn't mean every woman who flirts is headed for infidelity. For some, it's just a way to feel alive again, to test their ability to attract, to be seen. But for those who do take it further, the motivation isn't usually about replacing their husbands. It's about chasing something that feels lost. Excitement, novelty, and that deep, electric pull of emotional intensity. So then the real question becomes, what exactly are these women trying to recover, and what happens when that search leads them too far? In the last section, we peeled back the curtain on what many married women are truly chasing: freedom, thrill, and the intoxicating sense of being desired again. But what exactly does this pursuit cost the man who gets involved? Let's talk about that gamble. Many women who enter affairs aren't necessarily trying to fall in love again. They're seeking something that's harder to define. Maybe it's validation, maybe escape, maybe just a raw spark of passion that's gone missing in their daily life. Whatever the reason, the pattern is painfully consistent. When excitement fades in a marriage, duty often replaces desire, admiration becomes obligation, and the door to temptation creaks open. Not because love has died, but because the adrenaline of what if becomes irresistible. Now here's the part most men underestimate: the emotional gamble of getting involved with a married woman. At first, it feels exhilarating. It's not just about physical attraction, it's the rush of secrecy, the weight of forbidden glances, the stolen moments that feel like something out of a movie. But what starts off as an exciting escape from routine quickly evolves into something far more complex. Unlike a casual fling, an affair with a married woman creates a unique kind of psychological pull. She's technically unavailable, but not completely. She belongs to someone else, but she's giving a part of herself to you. That contradiction alone fuels a high that many men mistake for deep connection. And before they realize it, they're not just involved, they're emotionally invested. Here's where things get dangerous. Men often tell themselves, "It's just fun," or "I won't get attached." But the more time they spend with her, the more their imagination fills in the blanks. They begin to dream up futures where she's no longer married, where the affair transforms into a real relationship. They tell themselves that eventually she'll leave her husband, that if they're patient, committed, and emotionally supportive, she'd choose them instead. But here's the brutal truth. Most married women in affairs aren't looking to trade one relationship for another. They're looking to escape, not to start over. They want passion without pressure, excitement without sacrifice. And the idea of leaving their secure life, their home, their children, and their social identity. For most, it's not even on the table. This creates a sharp imbalance in emotional power. Unlike single women, married women who engage in affairs already have their foundation financially secure, socially accepted, emotionally supported. They have the luxury to explore desire without needing it to lead somewhere. It gives them a kind of quiet control that many men never notice until it's too late. She doesn't need him, she chooses him for now. And that temporary nature gives her the upper hand. For the man, however, the affair often becomes something deeper. He starts waiting for replies that take hours or never come. He starts questioning her affection. When she suddenly grows distant, he wrestles with jealousy over a husband he used to dismiss, but who now looms in the background like a shadow he can't escape. And the more emotionally attached he becomes, the more powerless he feels. Meanwhile, she controls the rhythm. She decides when they meet, how often they speak, and how much of her she chooses to reveal. And when things threaten to spill over into her real life, she can walk away in a heartbeat. For her, it was a moment, a thrill, a controlled indulgence. For him, it may have become a world. The harshest blow comes when he finally sees the truth. He was never the priority. No matter how many times she said she was unhappy in her marriage, no matter how many promises she whispered in the dark, she still went home to someone else. He becomes a ghost, a secret memory that fades while she carries on, untouched, unchanged. And he's left sorting through the broken pieces of something he thought was real. The lesson is hard but undeniable. When a man allows himself to fall emotionally into an affair with a married woman, he's gambling with his sanity. He may think he's calling the shots, but in reality she already knows how the game ends. She knows the risks. She's already prepared to walk away. But now the real question is he prepared for what happens next? In the previous section, we saw how a man caught in an affair with a married woman often finds himself emotionally overexposed, while she holds all the control. But what leads a woman to infidelity in the first place? It rarely happens the way people imagine. Let's break down the deeper patterns and the quiet justifications behind them. Infidelity doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It's rarely a spontaneous decision, nor is it always driven by pure desire or moral failure. More often, it grows slowly like a crack in a window pane that starts small but eventually shatters everything. Behind most affairs lies something deeper: unmet emotional needs, lingering resentments, or a creeping sense of disconnection. A woman stepping outside of her marriage isn't always chasing someone better. Sometimes she's chasing something different: the thrill of the unknown, the validation of being wanted again, the feeling of breaking free from routine, even for a moment. When a woman begins to feel emotionally neglected, when the connection that once anchored her in the relationship starts to fade, she might start looking outward, not with the intention to betray, but out of a deep craving to feel seen, valued, and alive again. And it rarely begins with a dramatic gesture. Often it starts with small, seemingly harmless things: a prolonged glance, a charming compliment, a flirty conversation that lingers in her mind longer than it should. These moments can feel intoxicating when compared to the emotional numbness she may feel at home, especially if she and her husband have been arguing more, or if she feels taken for granted, or if the spark has fizzled and been replaced by robotic routines. That emotional void creates the perfect storm for temptation. And then there's the environment: girls, nights out, lounges, bars, parties, social settings that mix alcohol with attention from strangers. These become emotional danger zones. In these spaces, her guard drops. She feels youthful again, desired, spontaneous. She may not be looking for anything to happen, but the more often she returns to that kind of atmosphere, the more likely a line will eventually be crossed. And for some women, the situation is even more complicated. Not every marriage is built on love. Some were built on logic, security, predictability. She may have chosen her husband, not because he stirred passion in her heart, but because he offered a life without chaos, a future that felt stable. But stability doesn't always come with attraction. And here lies one of the most painful paradoxes in relationships. The more a man bends over backwards to please, the more likely she is to quietly lose respect for him. She may not even realize it's happening. But as he becomes more passive, more accommodating, more predictable, the man she once appreciated for being safe may now seem unexciting, maybe even weak. And in that emotional vacuum, the type of man she once rejected, the wild card, the risk taker, the one who doesn't play by the rules, starts to look different, attractive even. Not because he's a better partner, but because he makes her feel something again. He doesn't seek her validation. He doesn't play it safe. He brings danger, unpredictability, and raw intensity, the very things missing from her marriage. That contrast becomes the hook. The very traits that made her husband a good provider now make him feel invisible. Meanwhile, the bad boy she once dismissed now triggers her deepest emotional cravings. So let's be clear, infidelity is rarely about love. It's about emotion, about wanting to feel again, to feel seen, to feel wanted, to feel exciting. It rarely happens overnight. It begins in the quiet, in the mind, in the emotions, in the subtle ways she begins to view herself differently, and her husband through a colder lens. It builds slowly until eventually something gives. But what happens when the emotional affair turns into physical betrayal? In the last section, we explored how infidelity is often a symptom of deeper emotional decay, a slow unraveling that begins long before any physical line is crossed. Now we move into one of the most overlooked truths of all. A marriage does not collapse in a single moment. It falls silently, piece by piece, when respect is lost, when a man fails to recognize the early signs, those quiet changes in body language, the colder tone in her voice, the withdrawal of admiration. He may one day wake up to a harsh truth. The woman he thought still loved him had already emotionally left the relationship long before she ever acted on it. This is the silent collapse. Respect isn't just a bonus in a marriage, it's the foundation. Without it, everything else, trust, loyalty, commitment, becomes fragile. When a woman no longer respects her husband, everything begins to shift. Her eyes stop lighting up when she sees him. Her words grow sharper. She no longer sees him as a protector, a leader, or even a partner. She sees him as weak, as someone she can manipulate, as someone who could be replaced. But this erosion doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, quiet, a gradual transformation where admiration fades into indifference, and indifference turns into contempt. On the surface, everything might look fine. The house still stands. The photos are still on the wall. But inside, the emotional structure is rotting. And when life applies pressure, whether it's an affair, a financial crisis, or a sudden argument, that weakened foundation collapses all at once. History has shown this time and again. Powerful men, politicians, CEOs, public figures who lost The respect of their wives often found their entire lives unraveling. Scandals, divorces, public humiliation. Not because they were bad providers, but because they forgot the one rule that matters. A woman who does not respect her husband no longer feels any loyalty to him. This is why infidelity is often just the final symptom, not the cause. It's the visible crack in a relationship that's been decaying underneath for years. A woman may tolerate many things: distance, disappointment, even periods of loneliness, but she cannot love a man she doesn't respect. And when that respect dies, the loyalty follows. It might begin innocently. A light conversation with someone who makes her laugh. A moment of eye contact that lasts a little too long. That spark she hasn't felt in years, suddenly, it's back. And as she grows colder toward her husband, the emotional barriers that once protected the marriage begin to crumble. Many men fall into a dangerous illusion. They believe that once they're married, they're safe. That the vows they exchanged will shield them from disconnection. But that's not how relationships work. Marriage doesn't automatically create respect, and it certainly doesn't guarantee loyalty. These things have to be earned consistently, patiently, and with intention. The moment a man stops showing up with presence, when he becomes too passive, too agreeable, too detached, he starts to lose the very thing that holds her in a relationship. A woman doesn't wake up one day and decide to betray her husband. The betrayal begins long before, with quiet disappointments, emotional distance, and the slow fading of admiration. If left unspoken and unresolved, that emotional emptiness becomes the gateway to infidelity. The truth is hard to accept, but necessary to understand. A woman who still respects her husband deeply and sincerely won't cheat, because she sees him as a man of value. She knows he's not easily replaced, and she holds on to that bond. But once she starts seeing him as weak, as someone who's lost his edge or surrendered his strength, her emotional commitment begins to break. And when respect collapses, the entire marriage is already halfway gone. A weak foundation can't survive a storm. And a marriage without respect cannot withstand the trials of real life. So what's the solution? Can respect ever be rebuilt once it's lost? In the previous part, we exposed a hard truth. Once a woman loses respect for her husband, the relationship begins to collapse from within. But if that respect can be lost, can it also be earned back? Let's explore what that truly looks like. The only way for a man to rebuild respect in a broken marriage is to reclaim his own self-worth. He must stop looking to her for validation and start becoming a man who respects himself. This doesn't come from shouting demands or issuing ultimatums. It comes from his presence, his confidence, and his ability to lead with quiet strength and clarity. A man who leads not by control, but by character reminds his partner why she once admired him. A woman may love a kind man, but she respects a man who respects himself. And without that core of inner strength, nothing else matters. But what about the man who steps into an affair convinced he's found something more real, more passionate, more honest? Here's where the illusion begins, the illusion of the affair. Married woman typically does not pursue an affair out of love. She's not looking for a new life partner. She's seeking escape from the routine, from predictability, from the numbing cycle of chores, responsibilities, and emotional distance. She's chasing a feeling, not a future. And here's the twist. The men she often attracts aren't looking for long-term commitment either. These are usually men who fear emotional depth, who want excitement without strings, who find comfort in knowing she's already taken, because that means She won't ask for more. At first, everything feels electric. The secrecy, the urgency, the stolen moments that feel stolen from another world. The man convinces himself it's different, that she's different, that the connection they share is real, maybe even sacred. He believes she wants him, not out of convenience but out of deep, raw desire. That's the illusion. He thinks he's in control, that he won't get attached, that he knows the rules of the game. But emotions don't play by rules, and somewhere along the way, something shifts. He wants more. He wants her to leave her husband. He wants to stop hiding. He wants to be chosen. But here's the truth. She never intended to choose. To her, he was a spark in a life that felt dull, a private rebellion, a temporary thrill to remind herself that she still had power, charm, and desirability. He was never her plan, only her escape. The moment he asks for more real time, real commitment, real love, the illusion begins to crack. She pulls back. Suddenly, she's unavailable, distant, dismissive, and confused. He clings harder, believing that if he just proves his devotion, she'll come around. That if he waits long enough, she'll leave her husband. But time is not his friend. The longer the affair drags on, the clearer it becomes. He is not her future. He is a chapter 1 she never intended to keep open forever. And when that chapter ends, she returns to her life, her family, her image, while he is left behind with no title, no security, no answers. Just silence, just heartbreak, just the painful realization that he was never the one, only a passing storm in someone else's story. But here's the final piece we need to understand. What does a man do after he's been discarded? How does he recover his dignity, his focus, and his sense of self? In the last section, we faced the painful truth. To her, he was never the main character, just a fleeting chapter. Now, we arrive at the final truth that ties everything together. The foundation of every relationship is respect, and without it, nothing else can hold. Respect is either there from the beginning, or it never truly exists at all. You can't negotiate for it. You can't earn it over time with kindness, patience, or unrelenting devotion. And no matter how long you try or how deeply you love a woman who doesn't respect you from the start will never be moved by your effort. Marriage doesn't fix that. Commitment doesn't change it. In fact, those vows often only magnify the imbalance that was already there. If she questioned his strength before marriage, she challenged it even more after. If she overlooked him, dismissed him, or quietly judged him before they exchanged rings, that sense of entitlement will only grow stronger over time. And here's where so many men fall into a silent trap. They believe love can compensate for a lack of respect. But love without respect? That isn't love. It's slow burning resentment waiting to surface when things fall apart. Infidelity, in many ways, reveals a person's true nature more clearly than their words ever could. Some cheat because they're emotionally weak. Others do it because it's a pattern they've never had to confront. They don't even try to stop. For them, betrayal isn't a moment, it's a lifestyle. The reasons may vary, but the outcome? It's the same. A man who convinces himself that a woman will change after breaking his trust is lying to himself. If she had genuinely respected him, she would have never risked losing him in the first place. And yes, the reverse is also true. Trust isn't a broken object you can glue back together. Once it shatters, it's no longer what it once was. And pretending it can be repaired only drags both people into a cycle of damage and denial. That's why recognizing red flags, Early is not about being jaded or cynical, it's about self-respect. Man who turns a blind eye to disrespectful behavior, who justifies manipulation in the name of love, is setting himself up to be controlled, to be used, to be emotionally tossed around at her convenience. He becomes easy to manipulate, easy to test, easy to discard. But a man who knows his values, who enforces boundaries with calm strength, is a man who commands respect, even in silence. Setting boundaries isn't about control. It's about protecting your energy, your peace, your identity, and deep down, women do respect men who draw the line and hold it, because true strength isn't how much you're willing to endure in a bad situation. It's your willingness to walk away from one. Of course, this reflection isn't only for men. Women, too, must confront their own truths. If they're unhappy in a relationship, the answer isn't escape through secrecy or short-lived affairs. It's honest evaluation. They must ask, do I want to fix this? Or is it time to let go? Choosing temporary excitement as a way to avoid deeper emotional problems only leads to long-term damage. It's easy to justify reckless decisions in the heat of the moment, but life doesn't hand out clean slates. There are no drafts in real life, no undo button. A single decision made in a moment of weakness can echo for years. This is true for both men and women. So what does it take to move forward, not with bitterness, but with clarity? What are the final steps to reclaim your power and rebuild trust in yourself? Let's wrap this up with some honest final thoughts. In the last section, we reflected on how every relationship, every affair, every heartbreak is shaped by choices. Now let's bring everything together with one final truth. At the heart of it all, life is built on choices, the choice to respect or to disregard, the choice to tell the truth or to lie, the choice to stay or to walk away. When decisions are made from emotion alone, from jealousy, fear, loneliness, or anger, they often carry long-term consequences that outlast the moment. But those who pause, think beyond the temporary high, and consider the weight of their actions, those are the ones who protect their peace. A man who truly understands this doesn't chase, he doesn't beg, he doesn't try to convince someone to love him. Instead, he stands grounded in who he is, unshaken, calm, self-possessed. Because he knows this, the right woman will recognize his value without him having to perform or prove a thing. And that kind of man, he doesn't just attract loyalty for a moment. He earns respect for a lifetime. Conclusion: marriage, in its rawest form, doesn't transform people, it reveals them. It exposes their values, their insecurities, their integrity, or their lack of it. A wedding ring isn't a shield against betrayal. It isn't a magical contract that guarantees loyalty. If anything, it amplifies what already exists: the cracks, the character, and the core of both partners. When some women lose emotional connection in a marriage, they search for thrill, attention, or validation outside of it. Others, however, stay loyal not out of obligation, but out of deep respect and love for the man they chose. For men, recognizing the truth of these dynamics is essential. Turning a blind eye to red flags or believing that love alone will protect a relationship is not just naive, it's dangerous. Real strength lies in self-respect, in setting non-negotiable boundaries, in walking away when necessary, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. And for women, the same mirror applies. If there's pain or dissatisfaction, the answer isn't secrecy or impulsive choices. It's honest reflection and courageous decisions. Recklessness may bring a rush, but it almost always comes with a price. The truth is simple. Every decision echoes. Every moment of clarity saves you from years of confusion. Every act of integrity builds a foundation worth standing on. Whether you're in a relationship, leaving one, or learning from the past, remember this: what you tolerate today shapes what you live with tomorrow. Choose wisely. Live with purpose. Protect your peace.